Well, thank you all very much for being here and listening. Oh, I better use the... And this is the title of my talk, Changing the Role of Fathers in Schools and Champion Dads. And I speak on behalf of the Fathering Project. But I'll just tell you about a conversation we had at the back there, which goes like this. And this is obvious, but I feel like I should mention it. Kids used to have a plethora of inputs in life. They went to Scouts, they went to Sunday school, they had grandfathers who lived in the next street and uncles and all sorts of things. They don't have them anymore. And I'm not saying that schools should bear this responsibility. I say it's that schools have a fantastic opportunity to do for kids what they've lost in society. I mean, after 195,000 years of Homo sapien walking on this planet, for 194,800 of those years, they've lived in those sort of communities. Now the kids are, for the first time ever, missing, and schools have this wonderful opportunity. So when I talk to teachers, this is what I hear. They sign up full of idealism, and I'm sure people in this room are exactly the same. But then they find, and I know that there's a lot of teachers who quit because of this, they find kids who are disinterested and lack curiosity about learning. Learning just doesn't interest them and makes them possibly unemployable down the track. Kids aggressive to teachers, other kids and the school. Obviously bullying, aggression towards teachers and vandalism. And then, and I'm sure you have your radar out for this, kids who are vulnerable, and I've shown their drug addiction, substance abuse and depression, suicide. And as a doctor, it's the last one that really I see. And I have to say something as a doctor. It is a very frightening world for young people out there now. Not as dangerous as when you were an adolescent, it's vastly more dangerous. And, you know, I don't want to be pseudo-alarming here, but, you know, 32% of young people binge drink at least once a week at the age of 16, 17. And that's girls as well as boys. And you don't have to be a genius to work out what risks that puts them at. Anyway, these are things that I know worry you. So, here's some statistics. I actually decided not to put too many of these things in because you know the statistics already. 2/3 of teachers say bad behaviour is a major problem in their school. Pupils miss out on an hour a day due to disruptive behaviour of other kids. That's 38 learning days a year. And 27% of years 4 to 9 students in Australia are cyberbullied every week or every few weeks. Anyway, that's a problem, and I'm not that interested in talking about problems. I'm a solution-driven guy. I don't just want to do an X-ray. I want to give some antibiotics and fix the problem. So let's have a solution-driven discussion. So here's statistically the most powerful... this is such a goose of a question. You know exactly what the answer is here. Statistically, the most powerful untapped force to change these problems is legislation. Government should fix it? No chance. Police, the police commissioners are begging people to stop asking them to fix these problems. They can't. Classroom teachers always being leaned on to fix the problem. And I am not going to be telling you to fix the problem today. I'm not going to lay that expectation on. School counsellors and chaplains, school principals, mothers. The most powerful untapped force is fathers. And hence, we work with fathers. And the Fathering Project, which we set up about 10, 12 years ago, has been described as the most powerful force in Australia to improve the future of our young people. And I hope to convince you of that and to work out how we might work in partnership. So this is what I'm talking about, how we can together have a huge effect on the future of Australian kids. So it's in the educational process, of course, but also in their lives. So people always want to know, because I get introduced for what I do, why a doctor would be doing this. And I have to tell you the honest truth, I didn't know all this stuff when I started, but I sit there and that's me. I'm a lung specialist, so I'm looking at a CT scan. Here's a quiz question for you. What is the commonest lethal cancer in Australia? So I heard a voice. Melanoma, not even close. Brain, not even close. Bowel, no. Yeah, you can sort of, again, this is a bit of a Clayton's question. Good, it's lung cancer. Because I'm a lung specialist, right? But I tell you, I sit in my office and I have to break the bad news to men. I have a cancer patient, usually a man, not always, in my office every week. And I have to break the bad news or help them on the journey to death. And I can tell you, how many times can I sit there and hear a man say, if I had my life all over again, I would spend more time with my kids. That's the only thing they say. So how many times could I do that before I thought, Bruce, you have to do something? And I didn't plan to set out to start the fathering project. I just decided to write a book because the problem was busyness. And blokes didn't know how to handle their busy life. So I wrote a book called Fathering from the Fast Lane. And of course, I didn't know what I was talking about, so I interviewed a whole bunch of men. Like, I've interviewed now over 400 men, women, kids, etc., about what works. So I didn't pinch their ideas, I quoted them. But here's the funny thing that happened. This thing became a bestseller. And so people assumed I knew what I was talking about. So they asked me to think about it, and I started to do research, and hence the Fathering Project. But it came from a very deep sadness that men live a life such that when they sit in my office and get the bad news, they live with regrets. Now, I don't know about you, just think about your own life for the moment. If you're in my office, and we're just talking now actually about, we're just talking about parenting now, but I'm sure you all have regrets. But if you were to sit in my office right now and get the bad news, you had 3 months, 6 months to live, what would be your level of regret, your main regrets about children? Either your own or people for whom you are a father or mother figure. It's a very, as you can imagine, poignant moment in my practice. And I sometimes weep. Sometimes when the patient is there, especially if they're young and I can hear the kids, sitting out in the waiting room with grandma. But sometimes, honestly, it's just so sad. So even as a personal thing, can I say, think about that and live your life now so that you don't have those regrets. Say what you need to say, do what you need to do. That's how I started. And that's what sort of drives me on. But from that, because of all the research, we started the Fathering Project. And I've just put the website there. I think you've got some things on your seats that has the website. But we've done lots of things, the books, DVD. The DVD there is called What Kids Really Need from Their Dads. We made that, and I'm going to show you a little clip in a few minutes. We show that at schools. And we've got this thing called the Dunny book. I don't have a copy up here with me, but one of the things we learned in our research earlier on is that men don't read books. They say to their wife, you read the book and tell me what I need to know. And when there's a parenting seminar, they say, well, I'm sure you know this, but I'll tell you anyway. They say, you go and come back and tell me what I need to know, but just tell me in dot point form. Give me the 3 main things I need to do. So we wrote a book specifically for dads. And it's about that thick, and it's about that big, and it's written in dot point form. And it's called the Blue Book of Tips for Fathers and Father Figures, but it's called by them the Dunny book because they leave it in the dunny, and when they're sitting in the dunny, they just flick through and whatever the day, if it's the 12th of June, they look at page 12 and that's how they remember what to do. So we, I don't mean like blokes, I don't mean to put us down, but I'll tell you, I was exactly the same. Anyway, the point is the Fathering Project knows how to get to men. We know how to get to dads, we know how they think, and we've succeeded in doing it. We send them weekly tips. Every Monday morning they get a tip, and we set up champion dads groups in each school, which I'll mention later. Now this is a bit boring, but I've got to tell you this because it's we want you to be involved, so you need to know what it is. It's a university-based project. It's based on research and best practice, not ideological. It's secular. It's got a corporate board and CEO and a team of people who work, and then an expert advisory group. It's been widely endorsed in education, both state and federal. And here's an important point, it's supported by mothers. And I was actually, where am I? In Sydney, right, okay. So I was in Sydney a few weeks ago. We met with the Premier because they want to roll this project out big time in New South Wales. They're begging us, actually. So we met with the Premier, the Governor, the Commissioner and a bunch of other people. And the Premier said, oh, do you get any sort of negative feedback because it's like gender biased? I say, we were nervous about that early on. I said, we have never had a moment's blowback from anyone, mothers, feminists, anyone, because we are totally focused on the fact that kids need a father figure, and everyone knows that. It's obvious from statistics, never had any problem, and mothers are incredibly supportive, and it's powerfully effective. And we've got lots of support from all sorts of people. I mean, this is, you know, there's Steve Biddulph and a bunch of Test cricketers there, Justin Langer, Dennis Lilly, Professor of Paediatrics, some politicians, corporate leaders, Australians of the Year. I mean, everyone thinks this is a great idea and is willing to put their name to it. And here's a quote from John Anderson, used to be Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, and I thought this was pretty cool, so I thought I would quote it. I have personally been helped by the Fathering Project and am absolutely convinced that this is something Australian dads need and their kids need. And because these kids are the future of our country needs it as well. I thought, that's a cool thing to say. It encapsulates really why I bother. So people say, isn't it great that you're working with dads, that you're helping dads? And I just have a slight correction, and maybe you need this correction as well, I don't know. But we're actually not focused on dads. We are actually focused on kids. And that picture there, it's the future of children we're interested in. We have a fathering project set up because we are interested in the future well-being of children. It includes their educational capacity and behaviour, but of course extends beyond that. But it just so happens, and these are the issues that we deal with. School problems, of course, you know, we've talked about values, the loss of values, selfishness, the sort of egocentricity, me sort of thing, and lack of integrity leading to crime and things. Problems with self-esteem, the feeling of being worthless. I think it's easy for kids nowadays to feel like they're coming out of a photocopier, that they're not special, that they're not actually worth a lot, leading to depression, of course, and then substance abuse. Now, these are the issues that every parent worries about. It just so happens that we work with fathers because if kids have a strong and appropriate father figure, there's a 50 to 90% reduction in risk of all these things. So this is, I'm just summarising in one arrow here, about 600 papers that we've reviewed, but I don't think anyone argues with this. The problems are well known, and in education I'm sure you've seen them. The power of a strong and appropriate father figure, especially a father, but not always, is enormous. That's why we work with dads. It's actually a cool statistic because when you think about it, if you look at those problems and imagine the Fathering Project is incredibly successful, right? So every school in the country has a champion dads group and every kid in that school gets bathed in some kind of father figure. You're a great kid, I believe in you, you know, whatever. The stuff we talk about, the effect on these problems in the country would be enormous. I mean, they cost $15 billion a year, these problems in Australia alone. So, but it's, you know, sort of obvious. But not all kids have got a good dad and not all kids have got a dad, so we do work a lot with father figures, grandfathers, uncles, teachers, etc., sports coaches.